This conference will now be recorded.
Right. So the other day we just touched upon Terraform, right? So let me close the state file. We just touched upon Terraform and said, there are a couple of basic commands. And to begin with, we said we will need to begin with something known as a Terraform init, right? To initialize things out. Terraform init or Terraform initialization in short is going to basically download firstly the resource provider. In our case, what? In our case, it is Azure RM is the resource provider out here, meaning you're trying to deploy resources on Azure. So you say, okay, fine, it is Azure RM, and you kind of basically, download the plugins and etc. and you do this. Second command that you do is called Terraform plan. And what does a Terraform plan do? It's like it does a comparison. It does a comparison between the existing state or the existing state file, or sorry, the existing main.tf file to what is there in Azure. And then it draws up telling that, okay, fine, there are,
Did
do we,
did you
yeah,
record the session?
yes, I did. Thanks for that. Fine. So I did record the session. I started the recording of my session. Yes, I did that. Okay, fine. So plan is going to basically do a comparison between the existing main file. Okay, so you have a main file, and under main file you have a couple of resources. Like in our case, let's say a resource group basically Azure is being created. So what it does is firstly it sees or it checks rather if the that particular resource group with that particular name already exists or not. That is the first thing it's going to do, and it's going to basically in the backend generate something known as a plan.tf file or plan.tf plan file, a very simple plan file which says, okay, fine, this is the execution plan. We need to, let's say, add a resource that is not already present, so one resource to add. That what it tells you. Finally, this is just the plan, to generate or to do a comparison between what is there on your main.tf file, and then do a comparison on the Azure portal, and then have a basically an understanding of what we need to do and etc. Now the main part comes when you do a Terraform apply. What does a Terraform apply do is that it takes that plan, whatever plan that you have created, it takes that particular plan, makes use of that particular plan, and then creates the resources on Azure, creates the resources on Azure, and not only this, it kind of generates a file called state file. This is called terraform.tf state. .tf state. Now what does a state file do is that state file kind of maintains a JSON entries of all the objects that it has created. Objects as in resource groups or storage accounts, whatever that you're trying to create using Terraform. It kind of has an entry, or it kind of has a record of everything that Terraform is managing on the Azure portal. So what happens is that this now would be something known as a source of truth, meaning this now every time when you do an apply, every time when you do a plan and etc., now the state file comes into picture and says Terraform will now say that, hey, you know what, this is the state of the architecture what I'm trying to maintain out here. Do they exist on the portal, or do they exist, let's say, in the Azure cloud? And let me do now a comparison. Let me see what else do I need to manage. If I basically enter something like resource group 2 out here, now it understands that, okay, fine, the state file as of now only has one particular resource group. I also want to go ahead and add a different resource group out there on the portal. So I'll also basically now make an entry to a different resource group, which I say that I will be managing, meaning the state file would be managing this out. So state again becomes a very crucial file. So what happens is that when you do a Terraform apply or when you do a Terraform plan, your state file gets locked, meaning there is a lock that gets applied onto your state file. And why do you need a lock is that when you are making the changes, you don't expect anyone else to make any change as such, right? So that's the reason the application, or let's say the planning of Terraform, applies a lock on the state file, so that no one else can make a change at the same time when you are doing, in order to avoid conflicts. This is the entire execution scheme of how Terraform really works. So you have different files, like the one that we seen is main file. So main is where you declare all your resources, and using main you are generating something known as a plan and a state. And here what is very important for a state file, which maintains the state of your architecture, or which maintains the configuration of all your resources that are present in Azure, whatever you're managing using Terraform. So until here, any questions, guys? I'm just doing a revision so that everyone is on the same page. So until here, does anyone have any questions that I can take?
Yeah, here this lock is
Mhm.
only specific to Terraform, right? Uh,
Correct. This
for
lock is
example,
specific to
if
Terraform. Mhm.
other resource using other Terraform in his computer, he will not able to push,
Mhm.
right? Will he
See,
able to
if what
push?
have no, he will be able to push, because this lock, right? It's like right now applied on my local machine. So that's the reason we don't push changes using the local machine at all. Rather, we use some CI/CD implementation out here, where everyone can be, basically sourcing out something from a central repository and then taking things forward in that.
Okay. And one more thing,
Hmm?
this lock is specific to Terraform. In case if you do it in GUI, Azure portal, there can
Hmm.
be modified
Yeah,
parallelly.
you can modify. You can modify it parallelly, but what will happen is that you'll get a lot of conflicting issues. It is not suggested to modify parallelly. Like if Terraform is managing a resource called A, and if you're trying to again manage the same resource from the portal, right, it'll generate a conflict out there. In that way, you will not be able to basically maintain efficiently the state of your infrastructure.
Okay. So basically, for example, if you have 10 members in the team, so
Mhm,
one try to Terraform, other may try through portal. So
mhm.
how can we avoid such issues?
So what is going to happen, Sanjay, is that in the real-time environment, we put in role-based access controls in such a way that you cannot go ahead directly and modify resources on the portal. You cannot do that directly on the portal. Like you cannot create a resource and you cannot do that. You need to do it via a REST API call, like a Terraform or like an ARM and etc. So you need to do it via that. And let's say if you modify the state of a resource, and you if you do it parallelly, even when ARM template is getting deployed, and if you try to do it parallelly, right, the first thing that goes in will be a success. The second thing that you're doing parallelly will be a failure. So it will be that way. So two REST APIs or two calls on the same resource will always result in a conflict. So either you're coming from an ARM background or you're coming using a Terraform as such, the parallel application of anything is highly not recommended.
Okay.
So that is the reason why what we do is that instead of approaching all these things from, let's say, the local machine and trying to kind of modify or manage, we use the Azure DevOps pipelines. We have, like, release pipelines which we make use of, and we know who's making what, who's doing what kind of a change, and the entire team kind of follows the entire practice. So if someone is trying to change it from, let's say, let's say directly from the portal, that will result in a failure. Now let's imagine that I am a resource, and you have a storage account created in LRS. But because of some reason I had to immediately change that to RAGRS. Like some reason I immediately had to change it to RAGRS. Now there is a resource too who's now basically going to the Azure pipelines and is trying to create the Azure pipeline and trying to deploy the Terraform template. Now what will happen is that Terraform plan will run, right? Now the plan will identify that the resource has changed, and during the application it will try to modify the resource back into LRS. So what you have to do in your template is you'll have to match your plan, or you'll have to basically match to what is there on the portal. So you need some point, or you need basically to establish some standard which everyone can follow. That's how basically we kind of do it in the real time environment. Does that answer your questions, Sanjay?
Yes, I got it. And this Terraform
Mhm,
plan, can we keep that
mhm.
output as an artifact somewhere? Can we save, or
So,
in case, see,
mhm,
this will give overview, right? So as an
Mhm.
artifact before doing any changes? Can we keep that output as an artifact?
Yes, you can do that. You can basically see what is the output and etc. You can do that.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. So now this is a very basic template where I'm going ahead and creating, let's say, something like a resource group. Now, what if I want to create something like a storage account inside this resource group called Terraform test one, or let's say Terraform test, and let's say this is east-us2. Now, if I did east-us2, right, and I'm just saving this out, my state file as of now contains this as west-us2. Okay. So just giving you a heads up that the state file has it at west-us2, and now I'm changing it to east-us2, and I want a storage account to be created in, let's say, the same resource group after the resource group is created. So how do I create the storage account? You can either just type in, the entire block, or you can just go to the Terraform documentations out here and say Terraform Azure provider and go to this particular Terraform documentation, and you can kind of search for, here you have all the resources that you can basically create using Terraforms. So you can say storage account. And if you come down to the storage sections out here, it says Azure RM storage account. This is what I really want to. And this is giving you an example on how to create it. So it's telling this is your resource group, something like this. And this is Azure something, something, something. And this is how you create. So what I'll say is I'll just take this entire thing. I'll come down to my template and I'll paste this out. Now it's telling one simple thing. It's Azure RM storage account, meaning the provider is a storage account. Name of the storage account, I'll just give something like storage account 1. Name of the storage account, I can give it something like dev test storage 2abc 000, something like this, or dev something, the something which is unique. And now see what all parameters that you really kind of think of when you create a storage account, right? First thing, the name of the storage account. Second thing, the resource group, location, the tier, replication, right? These are, let's say, a couple of mandatory parameters that you need to pass basically while creating a storage account, isn't it? Now the resource group name, see how the parameter is like, kind of getting referred to. It's telling resource group name is Azure RM underscore resource group dot example dot name. In my case, it is Azure RM underscore resource underscore group, and then I have given something known as RG Azure, right? So instead of example, I'll say RG Azure. So I am referring this block to the above. So, and I'll say RG location, meaning whatever I have declared out here as an alias name called Azure RM hyphen underscore resource hyphen underscore group, and then given it a name called RG Azure. I'm just making a call to it out here, telling the resource group name is Azure RM underscore resource underscore group dot this particular name. And once you find out that name, just go inside it and get the actual name of, let's say, the resource group and the actual location of the resource group, and assign it to, let's say, the storage account out here, meaning something like this. So I've declared something called as a resource group, RG Azure. I given it an alias name, and I'm using it out here in these two sections out here, telling that resource group name is something like the particular alias, which is the resource provider firstly, dot the sample name that I'm giving it to it, which is RG Azure dot name. And then you have Azure resource dot something or RG Azure dot location. Then finally you have an account here, which is standard account replication. I'll just put it as LRS. And then you have tags, right? So you can basically optionally pass tags or not, but I'll just say this is a development, for a development storage account, and just format this document out here. And what I'll do now is like I'll just save this out, and I'll do the same thing again. Instead of an initialization right now, I don't have to do an init because I already have all the Terraform modules installed with me. So what I'll do is I'll say Terraform plan. Now what's going to happen is that my plan is going to basically compare the state file with what is there on the Azure portal. And it'll say, okay, fine, this is what we need to now create. And it will basically refresh my state file, meaning my state file has the resource group in its memory as West US 2, because last time when we created in West US 2, right? Now we have changed the location to East US 2. Now what my Terraform plan command will do is that my Terraform plan basically will do a comparison with the Azure portal, and then it will say, okay, fine, these are the resources we need to create. So Azure resource group will be created, and Azure storage account with name something called storage account 1 will be created out here, right? So what I'll do here is that I'll say, okay, fine. Finally, I'll say Terraform apply, and the application part will now run. And the application part will just basically refer to the state file out here, see what are basically the resources we need to create, apply the entire thing, apply entire whatever you're creating in the main.tf file, and then update the state file out here to match with what is there on Azure. So in order to make a comparison and then match with what is there on Azure, it will include all the resources out here. So this is how things will actually work in Terraform. So I'll say yes, I can go ahead and say yes out here, and it will now basically go ahead and kind of create things out. Guys, until here, does do you all have any confusions, any questions? Is this confusing? Is it okay to understand?
But it should ask, can I delete the
Sorry,
resource? But
I
when we
didn't get you.
apply the plan,
hmm hmm
it will ask that, can I delete the existing resource group? Because we just changed the name location, right? So only
So
location.
I did not have anything in my account. Like I deleted everything, so there is nothing in my account.
Okay.
So
If
that
it will there, then it will ask
so
you.
if it is there, right? So what it'll do is like it won't ask you. It'll just modify it out. It'll tell you that there are two things I'll add, one things I'll change, and one thing I'll destroy. So I'll just give you the plan here. So according to the plan, you can say if you want to apply it or not. You can then take a call whether to apply it or not. But when you do a destroy, that's when it's going to ask whether you are you sure if you want to kind of destroy the entire resources and all.
Okay.
Okay, Akila. So when I started, I did not have anything on my Azure. Like I did not have anything, let's say, on the Azure portal as such. Okay, any questions with this approach, guys? Anything till here?
Hi, Kiran. Sorry, I joined late.
Okay.
Where can we get code? Can we write
I'm
or
sorry.
can we? Where
Where
can
can we
we?
get this code? This the one that I wrote.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so what you need to do, Chandra, is that I just went to something known as Terraform Azure Provider, and the first link out here, and this is the documentation basically that the Terraform basically gives out for Azure. Here you can just say storage account, and you'll have storage account different things basically that you can kind of create, and you can pick up the code from here. I just picked up the code from here, okay, and I just did some
Okay,
modifications to it.
got it.
Okay, and after a couple of minutes you can basically see what are all basically that are getting created out here. So you have a Terraform test out here which has got created. Let me expand this out. And you have a dev test storage to ABC000 which we just created using Terraform. Now, isn't this a bit easy when compared to ARM, guys? Like, isn't this a bit straightforward when compared to ARM? Like, does anyone feel that this is a bit tricky? This is a bit confusing? Like, did everyone understand the scheme of what we are creating right now?
Yes.
Yeah, compared to ARM templates, this is easiest to understand the
Yeah,
language.
it's easy to understand because it doesn't have a syntax, and that's the exact reason why I kind of explained ARM firstly. Because if I were to come from Terraform and then go to ARM, it'll be a slightly tricky part for you all to kind of collaborate, both of the things out there. But when you come from an ARM background and when you see how ARM is a bit complex, like it's since it's a JSON language, you'll have to basically do a bit of considerations on the syntax that you'll be using. This is syntax free, so that's the reason it's growing a bit of popularity these days. So this is good, but again, when you're coming especially from an ARM background, or when you're doing, let's say, creating resources and etc., you'd like to not hard code it, right? I mean, I don't want to hard code all my resources out here. Rather, can I use something like a different file out there, like something to parameterize everything, something like that. So yes, you can definitely have such a kind of functionality in Terraform that is using something known as a variables file. So what I would say is, in the same folder, I'll create another file called variables.tf, which will now act as the variable file for me, and I will now declare something known as variable with something known as the name of the variable. For example, I want to declare a name of the variable for storage account, so for resource group name. So I'll say name of the variable is nothing but rg name out here, and I'll say the type here is a string, and I'll say the default is something like test-rg2. So I'm now creating a new resource group out here, and this is the declaration syntax what I'm trying to follow out here. One thing I'm saying, okay fine, this is a variable, and I'm giving the name of the variable, and I'm saying the type it's a string, and the default value would be test-rg-2. Then how will I call this variable out here? Now I don't want to hard code things out, I want to call things out, right? So I'll say it is var.rg name, meaning I'm saying, what, go to something known as a variable file out here, and please take the value that is defined in this particular variable file. And as and when I did that, you see one reference out here. It's telling, what, there is one reference in your main file which is calling this particular guy called var.rg name. So I'm taking a reference to whatever I'm declaring in the variable. So what I'll do is, instead of hard coding everything out here, I'll say it is variable, and I'll say a variable for location, and I'll just declare the type and etc. So I'll say it is typ type, and I'll say this is string, and I'll say I'll say the default is something like east-us2, and I can also give a description out here, and I can say the location of the Azure data center for someone to understand. The same description can also be given out here, telling that description, it is the name of the Azure resource group, and I also have a storage account name, isn't it? So I'll say okay fine, variable storage account name, and I'll say okay fine, the type is something like string again, and the default value is something like storage 2zz abc001, something like this, and I'll say description is something like the name of the storage account in Azure and all that stuff. And if needed, I can also parameterize these things also. The account tier, which is standard, I can also parameterize those things also. But what I'm going to do here is that I'll say okay fine, this is not location, but this is variable dot location, and I'll say this is not a name, but this is variable dot storage account name, and you need to see this references basically that is popping out here, saying okay fine, this is being referred here, something this way. So what I'm doing is that I'm declaring all the variables out here, and then I am making sure to call the variables, or I'm making sure to refer the variables in my main template. So I'm saying this is how I want my variables to be. This is how basically I want to basically not hard code anything in my main template. Now what this gives me an advantage is that I can just have one main template, and I can basically change the values in my variable file. And each and every time that I change my value in my variable file, I'll get a new storage account, a new basically resource group and etc. that gets created, right? Ideally that way. So what I'll do right now is to just validate my changes. I'll say okay fine, clear screen. I'll again say Terraform plan. And now again it's going to look at what is there in the Azure portal to what is there in the state file, do a comparison and give you ideally what would be deleted, what will be recreated and all that stuff. So let's wait for this a second and let's see what will be created and all that stuff. So what I'm doing right now is that I am bringing in something known as a variable file in place now. And I'm now saying that, you know what, this is the variable file, and please refer to, let's say, the variables in there. Now it's saying, see, it's saying, okay, fine, I'm refreshing the state file. It's saying two to add and two to destroy. Now, why is it telling two to add and two to destroy? Is because you're changing the name of your variables. Now, I am saying that the resource group name is test rg2, but the name that is actually there on my portal is Terraform test or something like this, right? But I want to now create a resource group with the name called what? Test rg-2. Location where east us2. So location is the same, but the storage account name is also changing. The storage 2zz abc 201, like 001 and stuff like that. So it's telling, you know what, the plan will basically, it'll add two, but it'll also, basically destroy two, because all your name and everything will be replaced. So it's saying, you know what, Azure RM resource group must be replaced because the name that you are giving is a different one. Terraform-test will be replaced to Terraform-rg-2. Same applies to also your storage account, which will be replaced. So I'll firstly delete it, and then I'll do a force replacement, meaning force replacement will first delete everything that is there with this particular name and then basically give you a new one. So if I am okay with this, and if I say okay fine, Terraform apply, it will now say okay fine, these are the amount of resources that I need to delete. Are you okay with this? And it'll ask me to give a yes or no. And once I give a yes, I give my own consent, it will go ahead, firstly delete all the resources and then recreate things out. But in this case, we are not hard coding anything. We are not making sure, or we are rather making sure to have a variable.tf file in place and then apply and then do a Terraform apply. And this is the syntaxing and how basically it is linked. Now it's saying, okay, fine, this will add and delete everything. Do you want to be, do you want to, are you sure about it? I'll say yes. And now it will firstly delete those and then recreate it. So this is the plan of action, that instead of now doing a main.tf file, instead of having a static file out here, why don't I introduce some kind of a dynamism into it? Why don't I do it a bit dynamically and say it is variable.tf, put a variable file inside it, and then declare all the variables in this particular variable.tf file, and then start using this out. So how am I declaring again? So my syntax is something like this. It is variable, the name of the variable, and I'm saying type is a string and default value is something like this. And then I'm referencing that out here. And in VS Code, you can also see how it's being referenced, where it is being referenced. So your mapping is done something like this. So your variable that is declared here in the variable.tf file is being mapped to a resource or to an actual resource in the main.tf file by using a function called var.rgname, and then something like var.location, var.storage account name. This is the only thing that I did. So instead of hard coding it, I'm doing something like this. Guys, good till here?
Is it
Yeah,
mandatory
but
to create separate variable file? Usually we
So
declare variables in the
mhm,
same file.
correct, we declare variables in the same file, but the issue is that you cannot have multiple variable files. There can be only one variable file accompanied with a main file. Okay, so you can only have one variable file out there which can hold all your values. Okay.
Okay. I mean, we can't declare in main, right? It should be separate in Terraform.
Yes, it should be separate in Terraform. So if you're declaring a variable, then it has to be in a variable file.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, Chandra, you had a doubt.
Though we are creating the new RG and storage account,
Mhm.
why this repeat the existing resources? That
So
is
the
not the
thing is
case,
here,
right?
no, this is the case. So the thing is here is that you are declaring an alias, okay, called RG Azure. You're telling that your Azure RM resource group will be declared by something known as RG Azure. So what's happening is that your state file is maintaining the name in something like this. And it's saying under RG Azure, the name that I have in my memory is something called test rg-2. Okay. Then you have something known as Azure RM storage account, and the alias name that you provided is called a storage account 1. Meaning if you go to my main file, I said Azure RM storage account, and then the storage account 1 is the alias name that I provided. Under this, I am now declaring the name, location, and everything. So the state file is locking all these out in this way, telling that okay, fine, this is the name, the alias name is this, the provider is this, and this is all the ID, the name, and everything, right? So the name is something like this. Now, when you change the name, meaning you're essentially asking the state file to also change things out. Meaning what the state file is now assuming is that okay, fine, the user now wants me to change the existing state of the resources because this is the resource that I am maintaining on the Azure portal, and now the user is asking me to change the attribute of the resources. And if it's changing the attribute of the resources like something like name, right? So once the storage account gets created, you cannot change its name. So what will Terraform do right now is that Terraform will do a force delete. It will basically swipe out everything that you have on the portal and then recreate things out. Like, does this make sense, Chandra? Like, does this answer your question here?
Yes, yes. The logic is the alias name. So,
The logic is the alias name and using which it's storing all these things out in a state file.
correct. So if we change the alias name on the main file, then it will create a new resources.
It will create a new resource, exactly. You change the alias name and kind of do, let's say, a Terraform application, then it will basically create new resources out there. But the old resource will no longer exist in the state file. The old resource basically with this particular name called RG, like the Azure RG, that won't no longer basically exist in the main file out there. So main file will kind of maintain everything that you give it in the state file will maintain everything that you give in the main file, telling whatever the user has kind of declared in, let's say, the main file. I'll just make sure to handle everything in the state file. This is where your state file actually comes into picture. But then what if I want to, let's say, create something like this? I want an architecture, rather I want a main file and I want a variable file like this, which is good. But I'd like to maintain the state of all my environments. I have as of now a development environment under which you have a development resource group and a development storage account. You also have a testing environment or a QA environment where you have a QA resource group and a QA storage account. Staging and production. So let's talk about staging and production out here. Meaning, if I now change anything in my state file out here, or if, sorry, in my main file out here, or in my variable file out here, saying that this is dev storage account or dev stor account to abcxyz, something like this, and I apply this out, this is going to create what? It's going to, or let's say, let's also do this. Let's say this is dev rg. Now if I apply this, or now if I run a plan and then apply, guys, what is going to happen? Anyone? Anything?
The same that will replace the existing resource.
right? So it will replace the
Yeah,
existing ones. Yeah, it'll do a deletion of whatever is there in the existing here. Like if I do a refresh out here, I have, like, say something like test rg2, inside which I have something like this one. Meaning it will basically delete it. It'll delete this firstly and it'll create a new resource group called development. I mean dev rg, under which it will create a new storage account called what? Dev store abc xyz 200, something like this, right? Good enough, works for me. But I want to maintain this account, meaning I want to maintain the resource group. I want to maintain the state of this resource group for the development environment, but I still want to go ahead and create something known as a QA resource group, and let's say a QA storage account inside it. One option that you have is create a different template altogether, maintain it, which will basically, or create a different template, create a basically a different state file and all that stuff, and then make sure that you basically replicate all these resources. Meaning if you have 10 different environments, you'll have 10 different main files, 10 different variable files, 10 different state files and all that stuff, and you can maintain those. Administratively, a bit of headache, because there are like 30 different things right now that you're kind of looking at, because three environments and each and every environment has like three different files out here. So you'll have to maintain 30 different things. So a bit headache, yes, certainly yes. But is it achievable? Yes, it is achievable. But is there a workaround to it? Like, is there a way that I cannot, I mean, is there a way that I don't want to delete the resources, but I still want to end up creating different infrastructure and maintain the same infrastructure out here? Like, is there a way to do that? Now, there is certainly a way in order to do that using something known as TF-var. Meaning, I said you can only have one variable file out here, isn't it? I can now say that, you know what, let's not declare here. Let's take all these things out. Let's not declare here. Let's not declare the default values here. Rather, let's maintain another file called variables or variable dot tf-vars, which now I am telling Terraform that, you know what, I have something known as a variable dot tf-var, and the values of which I'll declare here. The syntaxing is very, very simple. Something like rg name. Sorry, or basically I'll say rg name is something like dev-rg. I'll say location is east to s2. East to s2. I'll say storage account name is something like dev test str account or stracc to xyz 000, something like this, and I'll save it. So what I'm now putting in place is something known as a tf-var file, and I'll declare all my variables out here. The advantage of this is that you can have multiple tf-vars. You can have one variable file, you can have multiple tf-vars, and over a period of time, right, you have a lot of variables to manage. So it'll be difficult, it'll be a bit more difficult to come here and kind of manage out this out, I mean all these out here. It's easy to declare and easy to manage using the tf-var. So let's say format document. It's easy to manage things out here. So then how do I use it? What do I do to use it? Is there anything else? Is there anything different that I need to do? So what I'll do right now is that I will now create a plan file. Until now, I am not creating any plan file. Until now, I am just telling Terraform plan, and in the backend, it's creating a plan file for me, and it is like, kind of handling all that stuff. But what I want to do now is that I want to say Let me see what is the command for that. So what I'll do is like just open, let's say, a PowerShell out here and just say Terraform plan. I see, imagine that I don't know any command. I want to basically understand what the commands or what are the options that I can apply along with plan. I'll say hyphen help. It'll give me so many things basically that I can do. It says destroy, refresh only, all that stuff. It says variable file equal to something like this. And it says, something like out is equal to path, something like this. So what I need to do right now is that I'll say, okay, fine. Terraform plan hyphen out. And I'll give a name of a file called testplan.tfplan. So now I'm explicitly telling this that, what, create a plan file called tfplan. And I know that you will rely upon variable, but you will not get the name, you will not get all these things from the variable. So for that, you need to rely upon a variable file called, meaning I'll say, okay, sorry for that, meaning I'll say hyphen var hyphen file. This is what it's giving me out here. Hyphen var hyphen file is equal to something like this. So I'll say hyphen var hyphen file is equal to, or let me see the syntax, is equal to, let's say something like, or let's say variables or variable dot tfvar, and I'll now start the application right now. Meaning what I'm doing essentially out here is that I am now telling my plan to explicitly create something known as a tf plan out here, and I am pointing it out to something known as a variable file. What this is going to do out here is that you can have multiple variable files, meaning you can have a variable file for test environment, you can have a variable file for development environment, QA environment, each and every individual things, right? And then while application, I can say, what, this is what you need to do. But still it's going ahead and saying, what, I need to basically add two things out here, because as of now you have the name of the research group to be, basically something like test hyphen rg hyphen 2. But the research group that you will now be creating is something known as dev hyphen rg. And even the name of the storage account will be changed something like this. So I'll replace all these things out here. This is what it's trying to tell. But this time I am not coming from, let's say, I am not doing a simple plan, but I am saying, what, please create something known as a TF plan file, which you cannot see using a VS editor, like using, let's say, a VS editor, you cannot see this, but I'm creating this out right now. So I am telling, what, this is my plan. This is a custom plan. I don't want Terraform to just go ahead and create some random plan out here. This is my custom plan out here. And now in bottom here, right, if you kind of do this, it'll tell you now when you apply it, please give this name, test plan hyphen TF plan. Please give this particular name out here. I'll say great. This is what I'm going to do now. I'll just copy the entire command out here, paste it out here. Now I am specifically telling Terraform to apply one plan called test plan dot tf plan. This is the plan that I want you to apply. So I am asking it, or rather forcing it, to say, hey, you know what? This is the plan that I want you to take out. This is the plan that I want you to apply. So please don't apply any random plan out here. Make sure you take this plan, because this is what my execution schema is. So please take this and apply this out. This is what I'm now telling Terraform right now. But it's still destroying. Yes, it is still destroying, because you only have one state file and everything is being tracked inside that state file. It will still go ahead and destroy things out and will create this out. But this time you're doing it a bit more different, telling that something like this and all that stuff. Now let's improvise this. Like, this is the very bare basic understanding that we need to do before we improvise things out, before we see how you can apply things onto different environments by maintaining the state file and etc. How you are going to do and all that stuff and all. We'll kind of see that. But guys, still here, like, are you all clear? Like, is it okay? Is this explanation okay out here?
Which means without deleting that previous plan, we're creating another, right?
No, you're deleting this out. See, the resource identification or the resource tracking is done in the state file. So in your state file, it is still telling that, you know what, it's a different thing. The name of, let's say, the resources that I maintain right now are different from what you're creating. You're still deleting it. But isn't this a bit more better than what we were doing earlier? Like you had to maintain something known as a variable file right there. And in variable.tf var, sorry, in variable.tf file, in variables.tf file, you had to declare a lot of syntaxing. So now I am avoiding the syntax and I am just giving a complete file here telling it's a tf var where I am just declaring individual variables out here and I am just escaping the syntax out here. All I'm doing is, let's say, syntax resolution, meaning syntax, I mean, making the syntaxes a bit easy. And I'm now creating the plan. But to answer your question, no, you're still deleting the resources because your TF state, right, at this point is pointing out to different names and you're now trying to override those names. So you're still deleting it. Does that answer your question, Akila?
Yeah, okay.
Uh, in the main file,
Hmm.
we are not declaring where it has to search the variables for variables.tf. Is
Correct.
that mandatory variables.tf file name, or how it will
With this
identify?
one, yes, it is mandatory. So the thing is here that now what you're doing is that, now what you're doing, Sanjay, is that you're not hard coding things out here. You are now asking it to rely upon a variable file. And Terraform by default will look at variables.tf. And in variable.tf, you are not declaring any variables as such. You are not doing anything as such. You are just declaring that this is a variable. That's it. And now you are overriding that using something known as a variable.tf var. Meaning, if I had another variable.tf var, now just for example, if I give another called test var.tf var, something like this. And I copy all the values from this one and I'll say this is dev rc-1 is2 this is something 01. Now if I, let's say, do a cls and let's again do a plan, and right now the variable file will be a bit different and say I'll say it is what test var.tfr tfrs. And now if I execute this plan, it will again fall back and it will say, you know what, the names are different and now I will create a new one. Meaning, don't you think this is a bit simplified than what we were doing here? Instead of declaring things out here, don't you think this is a bit easier in order to manage your infrastructure now?
Yes.
Right? Meaning I'm not firstly hard coding anything in my mail file. So I am achieving some sort of dynamism out here. Secondly, in my variable file, I am also not declaring there because I know that you can only have one variables.tf. But I know that you can have multiple tf vars. And now I'm maintaining everything. And when I'm applying things out or when I'm planning things out is where I'm just mentioning what is the tf var file you are going to use. Now what will happen is that the execution scheme, Terraform will first go to the main file. It says, okay, fine, the user has defined everything in a variable. It'll come to the variable.tf. It won't find the value, but you are now also giving something known as a test var.tf var. So it's saying, okay, fine, yeah, this variable was actually declared and the name is here. Okay, fine, that the user wants to give here. Now, if you have n number of variables, you can easily track them out here instead of doing from one variables.tf file. Does this answer a lot of questions, guys? Like, are you all comfortable with the scheme of operation?
And we put QA also there.
Yes, you can put QA, you can do that, but still, Akila, I am not recreating things. I am deleting and creating them out.
Yeah, yes.
I'm not maintaining it out because I only have one state file out here, right?
It will replace it. Yeah.
Yeah, it will delete and then, recreate things out.
To use
Yes, Chandra, you are
TF
right.
var,
Mm-hmm.
to use TFR files, but still we need a variable.tf file, right?
Yes, you still need a variable.tf file. You need to have one variable.tf file out here, because variable.tf file, right, Chandra, will have the declaration of variables. In the variable of tf file, or in the variable.tf file, you will just tell Terraform that, you know what, these are the variables, and you will basically point it out to the main, because this is what is the child item for your main file, because your main file will definitely refer to this particular file out here. It won't directly refer to the tfvars. It won't do that. It will basically take a reference to this particular, and if I delete this file, then everything else is going for a toss. So you definitely need a variable file out here. Does that answer your question, Chandra?
Yes.
Okay, guys, any questions still here? Any questions about this particular execution plan till here? Anything as such still here? Okay. So now what I am going to do is, like, let's see Terraform plan, and let's see if I have a capability to declare a state file. Yes, I have a capability to declare a state file. Great. Now what I'm going to do right now is that I would now like to create three different resource groups. One for dev, under which I need a storage account called dev storage account. And using the same template, I'd like to create something known as a QA storage account and QA resource group. Using the same template, I'd like to create, without deleting, the condition here is without deleting, I'd like to create the staging resource group, under which I need to create a staging storage account, and etc. So I want to maintain, or I'd like to maintain, the state of each and every environment that I do have, or that I'll kind of, provision out there. So simple plan is that you have environments, something like dev, QA, staging, and production, prod. And probably I want the storage account in LRS in dev and QA, GRS in staging, and GRS in prod. Because they are higher environments, I need to basically use a higher SKU and etc. So can I do it using the same files and everything out? Yes, I can definitely do that using the same Terraform files and everything. What I'll do is I'll delete firstly the TFVars, because this will basically create a bit of confusion. So I'll delete this out, and I'll say yes, move to recycle bin. I'll delete even this particular variable file out here, and I'll say move to recycle bin. Yes, that's okay, fine. This one, sorry, and say delete this out, which is great. Like, I deleted all these things out. Now I have a main file. I have something like plan and all that stuff, which is okay with me. But the thing that I'm right now concerned about is a main file, is the variables file out here. So main.tf and variables.tf. The variables.tf does not have a default value declared out here. Now what I want is different environments, right? So what I'll do is, like, come here and create a folder, and I'll say this is development. And under this folder, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new file, and I'll say it is dev.tfvars. Now what I'm going to do in dev.tfvars is that whatever declaration that I did out here, rg name, I'll say it is dev-rg, or development-rg, develop-rg. And now I'm going to say the location is something like this. Location is east to s2. And I'll say storage account name is something like dev store acc to abc 000 something like this. And what I'm also gonna do is like I'll just delete everything that is there in my Azure portal. So I'll just delete this one out so that it will be easy for us to kind of follow. So I'm just starting everything afresh, but I want to now create different environments using the same main file and variable files. But I'll do this in a bit different way to basically show how things we can track and all that stuff. So I'm just deleting this out and I'll say, okay, fine, this is safe. And also I had a condition where the SKU name basically should change according to, let's say, the environment, right? So what I'll say, I'll declare another variable called SKU name and I'll say type is nothing but a string. And I'll say description is nothing but the replication tier for Azure storage account. Done. This is what I'm trying to do out here. And what I'll do out here is that I'll say, okay, fine. I'll just take this out. I'll say var dot SKU name. And now if you look at the var dot SKU name out here, it'll have one reference out here that is like, kind of pointing out to the main file. Now what I'll do in dev dot something like this, I'll say dev.tf, I'll say SKU name is something like LRS. I'll just save this out. Now you can close this out and all that stuff. Now what I'd like to do is I'd like to maintain state files for each and everything, because state file is what which decides, right? State file is what which decides what are the resources that are present in one particular environment. I'd like to basically now do different state files for different plans or for different environments, one for dev, one for QA, one for staging and everything. This is the best way in order to do it. So instead of relying upon this terraform.tf state, what I'm now going to do is I'll say, okay, fine. It is not terraform.tf state what you need to refer. It's the same main file, which is great. But now when I do a Terraform plan, I'll say it is out file and I'll say it is inside this folder called development. So I'll say dot development and now I'll say it is dev plan dot tf plan, because it's a plan file basically that I'm creating. And I'll say variable file var file is inside the same folder, which is development, and it's dev.tf vars. Now I'll also create a state file for this. How do I create a state file? It says hyphen state. So I'll say it is hyphen state, which is dev or develop dot tf state. This is what I am now declaring out here, guys. So I am maintaining the plan, maintaining the variables inside a separate folder called development. Now this is a separate folder inside which I am maintaining the variables that are required for the development environment. Everything that is required for the development environment, one main file, one variable file. I'm not relying upon the existing state file. I'm creating a new state file for myself. So when I execute this out, now what it's going to do is it's now created something known as a develop.state file, right? It's now created, or it's now trying to say that, okay, fine, I will now need a new memory, because the user is now asking me not to rely upon the existing terraform.tf state, which I have like kind of created. But now I will rather now go ahead and create something known as a develop.tf state for a plan, something like this. Now see, it is not going to basically delete or destroy anything. Rather, it is now having a fresh memory, and it says, you know what, in order to apply this, do terraform apply something like this. So I'll just say take this out, take the command out here. Now what I'm doing is I'm forcing it to take a plan called develop plan. I'm saying, you know what, take a plan called develop plan, and development has altogether different parameters out here. The development environment has altogether different parameters out here. And I also want you to create something known as a state file for development, which would be something like dev state, something like that, and maintain the state of resources in that particular file out there. This is what I'm trying to do. And you can also give the same command for apply also, like you can say cls out here and say terraform apply. And if you don't know what command to give, you can say help. So it's saying, okay, fine, this is what it is and all that stuff. And I could have given a state file path out here telling that something like this to read the state file and all that stuff. But it should create me a new state file out here. That's what I'm expecting it to do. So let's see after the creation of the resource group, let's see how it kind of behaves out here. So yes, it has created something new. And let's see what is my terraform.tf state. Okay, so it's basically having the same thing. So I should have basically created a new state file out here. But let's see. So it's called develop rg. And here, what does it have? It has something like develop rg. So it's like kind of relied back on the same Terraform state file, which I shouldn't have done. I have basically I did not give a state out here. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm okay with this. I'm okay with this particular creation. But now I want to create a new uh, environment, which is called a QA environment. So I'll just create a new folder called QA folder. So not inside this, certainly. I'll say this one, and I'll create a new folder called QA. Okay, this is again getting created inside it. Okay, great. Let's delete this out. And let's say this one, let's say this one. And let's try to create a new folder out here. Strange. It isn't getting created. Okay, it's getting created under this. No, I don't need that. Yes, I have a subfolder called testing or QA. Anything is fine with me. I'll say testing. And inside which now I'll create another file called qa.tfvars. So I'll say qa.tfvars. And inside this file, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy everything out here. But instead of develop rg, I'll say it is qa.rg. Instead of, let's say, ECUS, I'll still basically go with ECUS. And I'll say this is QA. QA store 2 or QA store ACC 2ABC000. And this Q is still LRS. I'll say save. Now when I plan this out, I'll now say the out file is not the development folder but the testing folder, and I'll say it is qa.tfplan. I'll say var -file is the variable file that I declared inside this particular folder, which is, because see, the path where I'm operating is Terraform, like H Terraform, and under this I have another folder called testing. So that is the reason I'm giving this syntax out here, telling dot, then go into some folder called as testing, and when you're inside that folder, go for a file called tfvars, and I'll say state is test.tf state. And now it will now say, basically it will take a file called test.tf state out here, and now see, it won't delete things out, or rather it won't try to delete things out here. It will now say I will add things out. I won't delete the develop plan, or I won't delete, let's say, the developmental resources that you have created earlier. This is the way that I am maintaining the state of my resources. Now if you see things, right, it says I won't delete anything, like I won't delete anything out here, but it is optional for you to track all the state of the resources in a different state file. That is what I really want to do right now. So what I'll say is that, okay, fine. I'll say Terraform apply and I'll give the name of the state file path out here. Or I'll say state out is something like that. Path to write the state file out here. So this is what is the command basically that I'll kind of give out. So what I'll say is that I'll say Terraform apply and I'll say state, I'll say out, and now I'll give the name of a state file called test.tf state or whatever state file basically that we were kind of creating out. As a enter, it says yes. I mean it says okay fine, this is an issue and all that stuff. Let's see Terraform application and I'll say okay fine. Let's see what it's kind of expecting out here. Just Terraform apply and then help. So it says global options and apply and then options. Okay fine, and it says options are something like this. It says this is the option out here and it says basically something like this. Okay fine, let me do this. Let me say I'll just take this out. Let me track this out in this way. Now I know this is going to write into this particular state file out here, but I'm just trying to find out the command basically that we were using earlier in order to basically maintain the state of the resources. Now if I believe there is something known as the command line out here, let me see why it's giving me an error. That is something that I'm just trying to figure out. It's like state and then it's like giving the path out here, which is great. And I said state and out and then basically the path here. It says okay fine. State this can only be used to preserve an old state and stuff like that, which is great. And Terraform apply and then help. Okay fine. Auto brew. Okay fine. Backup paths. Fine. So I'll just figure this out like in a while. But guys, are you all able to follow this out? That what I am trying to do out here? Anything
Yes,
guys?
but that state file whichever we created for QA or the develop, that does not exist. Does it overwrite with the existing state file?
Yes, it's overriding right now with the existing state file. Like with the existing state file, what it's trying to do is that it's overriding this out. So once it's creating that, it's overriding this existing state file. But it shouldn't have done that. It should have like kind of created a new one. But since I'm not giving the path explicitly out here, it's overriding that file. Now there's a way to give the path as well. But what's happening right now is that it's not deleting the resources at least.
Okay.
It's not
So
deleting the resources.
once it
Yeah.
execute, then it is updating the existing main state
Existing
file.
state file exactly. So there is a way to not update the existing state file. We can also give, let's say there is a command basically to not basically update the existing state file. I'm just trying to see what is the exact syntax of it so that I can kind of give that particular syntaxing out here. But right now if I do a state and then an out, it's kind of giving an error out here telling that this is what it is. So let me see if there is any documentation for the Terraform apply. Let's say Terraform apply parameters, Terraform apply state out. So let's see, this is like or let's say Terraform apply. This will basically give me the command to apply and we'll see what are the parameters that I can use out here. Application options, it says auto approve, which is great. File. Okay. Destroy environment and etc. Okay, fine. I'll just try to see what is the command out here. But for now, I mean, I can just basically refer this documentation once and kind of see what is the command basically that you can maintain different state files out here. But if I remember, I had a documentation out here. I was doing something like that. Give me 1 second. Let me see if I have anything basically in my local machine that I've like kind of used earlier. Let me see. Let me see code base. Let me see Terraform. Let me see environments. And let me see command sheet. Yes, this is something that I kind of use. This is sometimes a bit tricky. It kind of basically a bit tricky out here when you kind of do it after a while. Okay, so you have Terraform apply, which is great. You have Terraform state, and then basically Terraform plan, which is like state, and out is something like this, state is something like this, and application is something like this. It should have actually created, it should have went ahead and created something like a state file for me, but it's not creating at this point. Let me check that. Let me see, why it's not creating something like that. Let me see if there is any command here. It basically has something like a state file out here. Let me see in the existing folder, which is called Terraform test. It's like development, and it just has these two things out here, and it is not as such allowing me to go ahead and create a plan out, an out file with something like a different state. Okay, I'll have to check this, Sunday. I'll have to check this, and I'll kind of get back on this. Okay.
Okay. And this Terraform will
Mhm.
use only in Visual Studio Code, or can we use it in somewhere else, other tool also?
Notepad++ also basically you can go ahead and kind of declare Terraform, but Visual Studio is the best recommendation, even what Terraform itself tells you, because it has all the IntelliSense kind of built in, and you can easily create files and all that stuff.
You mean Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code?
Code, the one that I'm using right now. Code is the best editor.
And
Hmm?
this Visual Studio Code is third-party tool. It's freeware, right?
It's a free, yes, it's a free version, yes.
Some companies they won't allow freewares. So in that case, is there any alternate?
No, if you're working on a development environments, meaning if you're working, let's say, on a development environment as like this, you will definitely use some or the other tool like this. It's a tool which is like, not exactly, I wouldn't say a freeware. It's a tool basically that Microsoft kind of suggests out, right? So it is safe to use. So if you're working in a development environment like the way we are doing right now, you will definitely end up using some or the other tool to, basically develop your language and etc.
Okay.
So can we write the code in Visual Code and we can upload to the Cloud Shell, Azure Cloud Shell, and we can run there, right?
Yes, you can do that as well. Yes, you can do that as well. But since I have the Azure CLI installed on my local machine, I am able to basically go ahead and kind of do all that stuff.
Okay.
But as far as I know, the command that we are giving is right. Like when we are giving a plan and then giving an out file, let's say, and say telling about state, it is right, but it's acting a bit weird right now because it's not like kind of creating a state file for me, and it's like kind of using the existing state. The reason could be because you already have a state file and it's making use of that particular state file and it's not creating something. If I delete the state file, right, which is like highly not advisable right now, if I delete the state file now, because if you see this particular working directory where I was using earlier, which I said a code base and all that stuff, when I was like preparing all this Terraform environments and etc., I do not really have, let's say, a state. I mean, okay, I had a state, okay, fine, but I kind of created a state later. So I'm not really sure at this point why it's like kind of behaving and not giving me a plan as such. Okay, let's say production, and I have a production state. It should have written a state file out here. I'm just wondering why it did not, because in application I don't really give something like give a state and all that stuff. So I'll just see why this is not writing. But as at this point, guys, any questions apart from this one? I'll just clarify this. Let's say I'll just try to do a bit of POC here, and I'll just clarify this out. So anything here, guys? Anything as such? Comfortable till here, guys?
Yes. Only thing is need to practice.
Okay.
Yeah,
I mean
little
there is a.
confused.
Mhm. Okay. So there is a lot of practice, of course, that we need to basically inculcate out here. Now this is all local, okay? This is all like in local. Now there is a concept on how you apply the same thing on Azure DevOps, which we will be seeing tomorrow. I don't want to overload you guys today with a lot of concepts out here. Today all I wanted to do is cover, let's say, the concept called variables and different set of variables out here and how can you create and all that stuff. And very importantly, please go through this. Whatever command that you're applying, please make sure to do a help out here. Let's say I do this very frequently. I'll say Terraform plan, ORM plan, and then help. It will give you all these things out, telling that okay, fine, this is how your plan is, and this is all that stuff, and etc. So very importantly, please practice this commands out, and try to do a help out here, so that you'll understand what commands that you can give and what is the syntaxing of it. Like once you kind of get the syntax terminology out here, right, it'll be pretty easy. Terraform is actually pretty easier than when you compare it with something like an ARM template. Now, what I want you all to do today is try this on Azure DevOps. Let's say just type in use Terraform in Azure DevOps. And the first link that you get is an Azure DevOps Labs, which will give you step-by-step application of what you are going to do, how you are going to save your state file, and what are the steps in Azure that you need to use. Like it's a very step-by-step, very calculated process as to what you need to do out here. And if you look at, let's say, the application mode, right, it's telling on all, it's telling basically do all these things and etc. So what I want you all to do is try this out. I'll give the link to it. Try this out. We will any which ways basically see all these commands in the class that we meet tomorrow. But please try this out. Please go through this link that I've just pasted out here, which is the Azure DevOps Labs, which is, let's say, a step-by-step application on what you do and all that stuff. This will tell you how you basically do a Terraform in something like Azure DevOps side of things. And try to practice this out, because why I'm stressing on this is because from now it should more be individual effort, meaning it should now be self-learning. You'll have to learn through these documentations and try to basically take a reliance on the internet. So you have everything out there, guys. You have like literally everything. All I'm trying to do right now is giving you a direction on how we are kind of heading out here. Okay.
Sure.
So concepts today that you need to cover are variables, var.tfvars, and try to do Azure DevOps. I wouldn't say I won't compel things out, but I would say try to do, and I would suggest you all to do that. I would suggest you all to just take a reference on Azure DevOps and see how things are kind of working out there. Is that okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. And guys, I have one quick request out here before we close the session. I'm planning to take the session from 9 a.m. tomorrow, so I'm just planning to shift it 1 hour. So does anyone have any issues if we kind of shift it? Does anyone have any conflicts with your offices and everything?
9 to 10.
Yes, correct. Any issues with this, guys? Any issues with the time shift out here?
Only tomorrow.
Only tomorrow or
The next week, the entire next week. See, the entire next week, the plan is Jenkins, Octopus, Dockers, and Kubernetes. So the next 1.5 week is what I'm thinking to just cover everything out, so that we are done with the syllabus. So I have Terraform with Azure DevOps. Sorry, I have Terraform with Azure DevOps, Jenkins, Octopus, Docker, and Kubernetes. These are the topics which are completely open source, and I want to take this on 9 to 10 out there, because I have another commitment from 8 to 9, and even before that I have another commitment. So I'm just trying to shift this class to see if everyone is comfortable and we can cover the topic out there.
tomorrow is fine for me. For Tuesday,
Okay,
I'll confirm.
okay, sure. Like anyone has any issues with this plan, guys? Anything that is conflicting with your schedule and everything?
No, I don't have any.
Okay. If someone has any issues with this, guys, please respond in the group and we'll try to kind of adjust the timings accordingly. Okay. But for today, please make sure to watch this video and try to understand the execution plan of what Terraform really is, and just try to see how you can use the var file according to, let's say, your practice. And what I'll probably do is, like, I'll just do a a very simple POC on how why isn't it writing the state file out there, and I'll probably inform one of you all so that you can keep the same command in the group and you all can also try the same thing out. Okay.
Sure.
Okay, thank you so much for your time on Sunday, guys, and we'll meet tomorrow at 9 a.m. and have a great day ahead. Thank you.